Have you ever wondered how some people can just face death and not even flinch, while for the rest of us it would be this totally earth-shattering event? It's a pretty deep question, right? It gets to the very limits of the human mind. Today, we're going to dive into the neuroscience behind what happens when seeing death becomes, well, just another day at the office.
So picture this. You've got two people standing over the same lifeless body. One is a surgeon, the other, a killer. The surgeon feels this immense, crushing weight of trying everything to save a life and failing. The killer, they feel nothing, just a quiet, empty silence. They are both looking at the exact same thing, but you better believe their brains are telling two completely different stories.
And here's the crazy part. They both, in their own unique ways, get used to it. The surgeon has to, right? To keep saving other lives. The killer, well, that's a whole other can of worms. So that brings us to the central question we're tackling here. How? How on earth does our brain, this incredibly complex organ, even allow this to happen?
To really get this, we have to look at a powerful kind of built-in feature of our minds. You can think of it like a protective shield, and neuroscientists have a very specific name for it. It's called emotional habituation. The best way to think about it is like your brain's emergency brake. When it's hit with an overwhelming emotional stimulus over and over and over again, like the trauma of death, the brain eventually just learns to turn down the volume. Now, this isn't about becoming cold or losing empathy. It's a straight-up survival mechanism. So this whole process happens in about 4 key stages. First, you've got the initial shock, where your mind is basically in denial, struggling to accept what your eyes are seeing. This triggers an amygdala overload. That's the fear and pain center of your brain, and it's just completely overwhelmed. Then, the brain adapts. It realizes, hey, feeling this much, this intensely, isn't sustainable. And that leads to the final step, emotional muting. The amygdala's response gets turned way down, not because the pain isn't real, but to allow the person to actually function. Okay, so let's see how this plays out with our first example, the doctor. For them, this adaptation isn't just some passive reaction. It becomes a critical professional tool. You know, the first time a medical student watches a patient die, something inside them just breaks. That idea that medicine can conquer anything, that ego that thought it had control, it completely shatters. And in that silence, the brain learns its first really brutal lesson. If you feel too much, you can't do your job. And so, the adaptation begins.
What's happening here is a major neurological shift. The amygdala, that little internal alarm bell, starts to get quieter with each loss. And at the same time, the prefrontal cortex, your brain's hub for logic and rational thought, it fires up and takes control. And get this, fMRI studies of experienced doctors show this exact thing happening. You can literally see the brain rewiring itself to prioritize clear thinking over emotional reaction. It's how they learn to stay cool and make life-or-death decisions in the middle of absolute chaos.
In psychology, there's a name for this state. It's called empathic resilience. It's this incredible ability to truly understand and even share in a patient's pain without letting that pain completely destroy you. It's the mental shield that lets a doctor deliver the worst possible news without breaking down or move on to the next patient just minutes after losing one.
But, no shield is perfect. After years of building up this resilience, some doctors start to disconnect, maybe more than they'd like. The tears stop, the trembling hands stop, and sometimes the feeling stops too. This is compassion fatigue. It's when the mind, just exhausted from years of caring so much, simply can't do it anymore. It's not a weakness. It's a profound emotional exhaustion. The brain learns to mute the pain, sure, but the body always remembers what it saw.
All right, now let's do a complete 180. Where the doctor has to build a shield to cope, the killer doesn't even need one. Their brain is fundamentally different, right from the very beginning.
So, this is the most crucial point to understand. The killer doesn't get used to death. In many cases, they were kind of born used to it. There's no process of adaptation because the emotional machinery to feel that loss and horror, it just isn't there in the same way. Neuroscience has actually shown that in many psychopathic individuals, the amygdala is just naturally underactive. It's quiet. When they're shown violent images, the brain's empathy centers, we're talking about regions like the orbital frontal cortex and the insula, they just stay cold and silent. There's no alarm bell for fear, no alarm for the pain of others. For this type of brain, death isn't a tragedy, it's just data.
So if there's no fear, no guilt, what is there? Well, the only real flicker of activity is often found in the brain's reward system. But it's not what you see in the movies. It's not pleasure from pain. No, it's the feeling of absolute power, the ultimate control over life and death. That is the reward.
So let's just break this down side by side. For the doctor, the path is a learned adaptation. It's motivated by a desire to save lives, and the brain's response is to manage emotion. For the killer, it's an innate condition. The motivation is to gain control, and the brain's response is to simply lack that emotion to begin with. Two totally different paths leading to a strangely similar routine. And that's where their worlds, as different as they are, find this strange and pretty unsettling point where they meet: the normalization of death.
At a certain point, for both the person who saves lives and the one who takes them, this becomes true. For one, it's a clinical process. For the other, a procedural one. But for both of them, that catastrophic emotional weight of death gets transformed into something manageable, something routine.
And this is really why this all matters so much. This constant exposure fundamentally changes how the brain perceives the entire world. Your sense of risk, your tolerance for pain, even your moral compass, it all begins to shift. The value of a single heartbeat, it becomes relative when you are constantly surrounded by its absence.
So, in the end, the habit of seeing death doesn't make you stronger. It makes you different. For some, that difference is channeled into science and healing. For others, into silence and destruction. But that transformation, it's undeniable.
So after exploring these two extremes, one born from compassion and the other from a complete lack of it, we're left with one final, kind of haunting thought.
How many times can you stare into that abyss before a part of you forgets what it even feels like to be in the light? It's a question that pushes the boundaries of neuroscience, and really, it touches the very core of what it means to be human.